Okay, so hi everyone. I think we're good to get started now. Everyone, hopefully, has been able to log on. Okay. So as I said, hello and welcome to the webinar. As part of this pre-application community consultation for the proposed redevelopment of a prominent site at the corner of Royal Avenue and North Street in Belfast City Centre. The application includes the full retention and restoration of the Grade B listed Art Deco former Bank of Ireland building, and the proposed redevelopment will include a boutique hotel, Grade A office space, and residential apartments. My name is Matthew Morrison. I work for Gravis Planning, and we are carrying out the community consultation for this proposal. I'm joined in the webinar by Niall McGuinness from White Ink Architects, by Graham Moore from Consort Conservation Architects, and by Paul Beacom from MRP, the applicant. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today. Obviously, under normal circumstances, the consultation with the wider public on this proposal would take place through a public event, but obviously due to the COVID-19 social distancing restrictions, the public consultation is being held online. Our consultation webpage on the Gravis website will continue to provide you with access to information on the proposed development and will enable you to comment and provide feedback, and will remain open until the end of this week. As part of the process, we're consulting with local people, stakeholders, politicians and business organisations before submitting a full planning application. This enables us to take on board any feedback we receive from the local community or any stakeholders in the area, and helps us inform the design of the proposal before a planning application is lodged before Belfast City Council for the end of this year. Before we begin the presentation, as I said earlier, for those who were on, you're all on mute and not visible on camera. The presentation will be followed by a short question and answer session, which will be facilitated at the end. You'll find the Q&A box, the dialog box on the side of your screen. And if you can click there, you can type in any questions into the dialog box and submit throughout the presentation. And at the end, we'll endeavour to answer the questions. If we don't get time to respond to them all, we'll follow up with an email. This webinar will be recorded and it will be available online at a later date for those who couldn't attend. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Niall from White Ink Architects, who is going to talk us through the proposals in more detail. So you can start now, Niall.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So I'm Niall, so I'm working at White Ink Architects here, based in the city centre in Belfast. So today I'm just going to be talking you through the concept, the brief, and then the design proposal that we have for this scheme here. So looking just firstly at the site, so it's an extremely important site within the city centre. It's at the Royal Avenue and North Street junction, and Royal Avenue frames a key view just down to the corner of our site. And then it leads you around to the Central Library, Belfast Telegraph Building, and the new University of Ulster campus. And then North Street as well. It's a key transport route into the city centre. So we have a key city node here. So the application site itself, then, it incorporates almost the full block. So there's two buildings in Royal Avenue, not included. Looking at the plan here, you've got Royal Avenue to the east side, North Street to the south, and then on the northwest you've Union Street, and then Kent Street to the northeast next to the Central Library. So the site also falls within the Inner Northwest Master Plan area and was previously included in the North Side Redevelopment Scheme. And it's an up-and-coming area and it's starting to gain a lot of investment, and we want this site really to act as a catalyst for the surrounding area. So front and centre on the site is the Bank of Ireland building, and we're aware of the importance of this building, and it's a much-loved landmark within our city centre. So we want this to be the main focus of the scheme, and it's about breathing new life into this building, retaining and restoring it, and opening it back up to the city. So I'll hand over here to Graham Moore, Director at Consort, just he'll give us a bit more information on the listed building.
Okay, thank you, Niall and Matthew. Hopefully everyone can hear me well. So good afternoon to everyone who's taken the time to listen to us and view these very exciting proposals. So as Niall said, my name is Graham Moore. I'm a conservation architect with Consort Conservation based in Belfast. So I'm going to briefly speak to you firstly about the history and significance of the former Bank of Ireland building, and then also the work that we're involved with. So the building was built in 1930 and designed by Joseph Downes of MacDonald and Dixon of Dublin. It's a listed building. It's a 4-storey Art Deco style building, and it's recognised as being hugely significant for the city. Apart from the significance of the building itself, it sits at a very important location, as Niall has said. So in terms of cityscape, it's a corner site with its clock tower terminating both the view down Royal Avenue as well as up the lower part of North Street. It's a very fine building, largely unaltered, and it's a very good example of the Art Deco movement, with vertical emphasis and detailing to stone and metalwork expressing the qualities of the style. The building also embraces relatively new technologies of the day, such as concrete framing, steel windows and spandrel panels. So some of those have given rise to some issues with the building, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So the building is one of the finest local examples of the Art Deco movement, and it sits amongst the rich architecture of Royal Avenue, providing a setting with a variety of styles amongst the historic building stock and more recent additions. The significance of the building is recognised by its status of B+ on the listed building database, as maintained by HED, or Historic Environment Division. This building record cites architectural and historic significance, including style, proportion, ornamentation, plan form and setting. The building is recognised also as having local interest, with its rarity and authorship also acknowledged. So Consort Conservation, we have been appointed as conservation architects and heritage consultants, working along with White Ink Architects as part of the very experienced team. Our work will include survey and analysis of the building, including work to establish the significance, as well as understanding the defects with the building and the required methods of repair. This work is underway and includes internal and external survey and recording. This is all informed by photography, drawings, details, and written notes. Internally, the work focuses on recording what significant elements of the building's features remain and identifies insensitive alterations. External condition surveys, which took place just last weekend, facilitated by high-level access, has recorded stone and metal defects and will diagnose the issues we referred to earlier with the building's concrete structural system. As is common with buildings of this age in construction, the Portland stone facing has become cracked and displaced by the corrosion of the steel. So it's all part of our work to try and establish just where those problems are occurring in order that it can all be made good. This work will also involve another part of the team with structural engineers and cathodic protection specialists, and they will assist in the specifications for the repair of the concrete in advance of the stone repairs. So as with all listed buildings, the entire building is listed. This is internally and externally. So therefore, all remaining historic material, including the Portland stone facing, Crittall steel windows and spandrel panels, as well as the decorative interiors, will be retained and refurbished. The building, which has now been vacant for some 15 years, will be repurposed for an appropriate and sustainable use as a hotel, and it will herald the arrival of the adjacent mixed-use development in this evolving part of the city. Our work to date has also included early engagement with HED and Belfast City Council Planning Department, with very positive early interactions to date, which we hope will continue as the project develops. So I will now hand back to Niall, who will present the proposals which we have been presented as part of the initial discussions. And thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Graham. So we'll look at now what's driving our design. So one of the initial things we looked at was the material palette. So we want to make the building of its place. We have analysed the surrounding context and studied the buildings and materials used, and immediately you start to pick up a typical Belfast palette. So you've brick, and you've mixed it, sandstone and Portland stone. but also there's this colour green which re-emerges, within the Bank of Ireland along North Street, and you're also picking it up in the sunflower bar adjacent to the site. So what we're proposing, we feel reflects this context, and we feel it will sit well within the surroundings. And the focus is about using high quality, robust materials with longevity, and that'll age well. And predominantly, we're looking at the use of red brick, and there'll be Portland stone in areas and tying in with the bank. And then we'll also, for some of the decorative flourishes, we'll be looking at introducing feature green glazed brick and metalwork. So as we look at how the massing has evolved within the scheme, we start to examine what typically makes a Belfast street and what makes a visually successful street, and maybe what is less successful. So I think the examples here summarise some of our findings here. So on one hand, you have quite a uniform block shoulder height, and there's quite a lack of variation in roofscape. It's very flat, lack of depth and bland, and you get extensive planar glazing here at this top section. And then on the other hand, to the bottom of the screen, you'll see quite a typical street that you get in the Cathedral Quarter. So you get diverse roofscapes, you get that sense of depth, rhythm, order, and hierarchy of the openings. And then you're also starting to see variation in the plot widths and proportions, and all of this stitches together to create that visual intrigue, and that's really what we're trying to take forward. So in the development of the massing and scale of the building, we were looking at how do we recreate this. So we were first looking at the plot widths, breaking up the site, and then we looked at trying to step the facade line just to create small pockets of space that will, at street level, that'll help, your experience of the street. So the variation in the height, then, we're respecting the line of the Bank of Ireland, and then we're increasing massing as we move away from the listed buildings. So where we do have height, we're looking to use slender proportions and give it a more elegant feel. And then crucially, we'll be maximising the active frontage and permeability across the site. So we're reducing the zone for servicing down as much as possible to allow active retail frontage to wrap all of North Street and Union Street and the edges of Kent Street, which is going to help draw footfall and boost these streets. And especially with Union Street and Kent Street, at the moment they feel more of a back street, so we really want to try and elevate them. And we think there's a real opportunity to enliven this area with this scheme. So finally, we're looking to try and give back to the city too, through introducing a new public square behind the listed Bank of Ireland building. And this will then link through from North Street to Kent Street with creation of a new Belfast entry. So, as I mentioned earlier, we want the listed building really to be the linchpin for our site. So the Bank of Ireland, again, it's framed really nicely by Royal Avenue. It's a key view. The tower sits perfectly along the Royal Avenue axis. And it's an important focal point within the city centre. We knew this was a key view when we first looked at the design. But one thing you do notice as you start to examine this further is there's quite a messy backdrop behind the clock tower. So it's cluttered, and you've got a blend of colour, you've plant areas and railings, and you've got the rendered apartment block poking its head around the corner there. So what we feel that is distracting, and really it's competing visually with the clock tower itself. So what we're looking to do is create a uniform backdrop to direct all the focus on the clock tower and the listed building itself. So when we first looked at this as a team, we used this analogy of a jewel in the box, about enhancing the view and appearance of this, and that's really what we're trying to recreate here. So this is the proposed nighttime shot in the scheme, and what we're trying to create here is a beacon at this key city junction and along this key city view, and it's about restoring the blank building to its former glory. And behind the clock tower at night, the decorative metal screen, it'll softly glow, and it'll allow the clock tower silhouette to pop forward. And then the backdrop, it's also been centered on the Royal Avenue clock tower axis, and we feel that once this building has been restored and cleaned up, this will be a real striking view, and it'll be beaming at the end of Royal Avenue. So the daytime views, really here we start to see the contrast that skin behind is creating, and then as you move closer, the clock tower starts to punch through the top of it, and also you get that extra level of detail starts to reveal itself in the skin. As you can see, the design evolves outwards from the Bank of Ireland building. So it's flanked by brick wings, again, contrasting with the Portland stone facade, really to try and make the listed building come to the fore and give it prominence. The details and the proportions all have subtly reference back to the bank building without detracting from it. We've got elongated, tall, slender windows. We've introduced the feature glazed brick panels. We've stepped brick coursing and piers, and then we're also trying to pick up key shoulder and parapet lines from the listed building. Then, as we move away from the listed building, we're raising the scale towards the corner, the North Street and Union Street junction. There's a coherent material palette defining the use, and then we're also trying to introduce them slender plot widths and emphasising the verticality in the scheme. And really, we're trying to create a strong corner to the North Street and Union Street junction, and the heights here that you're seeing will align with the approved schemes across the road and in the surrounding areas. So as we move on to the accommodation schedule, so the uses of the building, as were mentioned earlier, we're flanking the listed building. This will be a boutique hotel, which is shown in green here. The area in blue is proposed as the office workspace, and then the purple moving up towards the Union Street side is the residential apartments, and then wrapping the base we've got commercial units, and we're trying to just extend that around the site. What you're also seeing here is we're creating the new link, just kind of highlighted in red there on North Street, and that will link through to the new public square, and then it'll link back out on Kent Street beside the Central Library. And then we've also got a private, elevated, raised residential courtyard. So the hotel, we're looking at an 84-bed boutique hotel. It'll have, in the front of house areas, we'll have a restaurant, and we're looking at the bar being in the main bank hall, and all of this will open up into the square behind. The rooms within the listed building will become suites, and then the goal for this really is to become a hub of activity at day and night. I think this will really help this area of the city. Then, so the offices then, we're creating 120,000 square foot of Grade A office space. It's in a prime city centre location right at the end of Royal Avenue, and then the amenity spaces on the ground floor. And then the entrance lobby, it's all opening up off the new entry and the public square. So again, we're trying to draw footfall into that area and make it a really successful space. And then the top floor, as you can see here, we've got a setback terrace area, and we're trying to take advantage of those really impressive views out across the city centre and across the roofscapes there. So the area is highlighted in blue there at the bottom of your screen. That's kind of indicating the extent of the office accommodation. And then finally, the residential units. So supporting the council's aspirations and the Belfast agenda, we're trying to increase the inner city living here. So there's 96 residential apartments in total, and we've got a mix of 1, 2 and 3 bed apartments. And importantly, what we're trying to do is provide communal and private amenity space for the residents as well. So all the apartments here will have generous private balconies or terraces, and then all of these will also be located on an east, south or west axis to take advantage of morning or evening sun, and then accompanied by the communal, it'll be accompanied by a communal elevated courtyard and also a rooftop terrace again with views out over the city and across to Black Mountain. So again, as you can see here from the 3Ds, the mass, and what we're trying to do is respect the building heights within the surrounding context. So along Union Street, we're trying to pick up the key lines, from the back of the library building. We're stepping down from the North Street corner quite significantly. And then again, we're trying to introduce depth and steps within the building line to create that variation, and also with the terraces you're going to get a play of shadows throughout the day, so to really enliven that facade. And now this is looking at the amenity space. So on the top left here, you'll see we're creating the new public square, and then you can also see towards the top the private residential courtyard. And on the right hand side, we've got a view of the ground floor plan. So the area in blue, this is showing the entry, the Belfast entry, linking through to the new public square. We've drawn the entrance to the lobby for the offices in opening off this, and then again the restaurant bar area from the hotel will open into the square too. So during the day and night, this should be a hive of activity. You'll have people breaking out from the office space at lunchtime. You have an elevated seating area where our car park access comes down, so that will create this naturally elevated seating area in the sun trap. And really what we're trying to do is just create permeability across the site and draw people in and to use the space. So the green hatch areas too are showing the active frontage. So again, you'll see here, we're trying to wrap this, taking in the corner of Kent Street around the entire site and around Union Street again. So what we're trying to do there is the area in purple is really minimizing the service zone that we have. We will need that area, but we're trying to reduce it as much as possible so it has as little impact in the scheme as possible. And we really want to elevate Kent Street and Union Street because it's a real up and coming area there, and we feel that's something that this scheme can really do. So we're in the process of having a look at what makes the Belfast entry special. So that's something we're incorporating into the design at the moment. And really what we're trying to do here is at ground level, in the spaces that you experience, the areas you touch and you see at eye level, we really want to increase the quality here. We want to create a coherent language across the base. And we're already looking at closely at how you deal with signage zones and ventilation zones in order to really enhance the public realm at that area. So some of the overall benefits of the scheme, really what we're trying to do here is breathe new life back into the Bank of Ireland building. The scheme will also regenerate the site. We're providing active frontage, and it's a prominent city centre location. It's supporting the tourism offer and through the introduction of the hotel. There's a large amount of investment going in here from the client, and we're over the course of the project, we'll be looking at creating a significant number of jobs in the construction industry, but also full-time jobs in the hospitality and retail sectors. We're supporting the council's aspiration to increase city centre living, and we're also providing prime grade A office accommodation, which will help to attract inward investment within the city centre. So we feel that there's huge potential here with this scheme, and we hope that you will agree with us that this could be a really good addition now to the city centre and enliven this area. So I'll hand back to you, Matthew.
Okay, yep. Thanks, Niall. I think that was a really useful and helpful run through the proposals for everyone. Just before we move on to the Q&A session, there are no questions submitted so far as I can see. So anyone, I know there are a few late attendees who came on. So if you do have any questions or queries, you can drop them into the Q&A dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we can address them over the next couple of minutes. I guess just want to say that the consultation period, is still ongoing. It's still live on our website. After it is closed, we'll pull together a pre-application community consultation report, and the design team will work to finalise the planning application, which will then be submitted in Belfast to Belfast City Council over the coming months. You can continue to contact us with feedback or comments after this webinar through either the feedback function on our website, via email at northstreet@gravisplanning.com, by calling 028 9692 7258, or in writing to our address, which is shown now on screen. As I say, this webinar will be recorded and placed on the website, so it can be watched back at a later date. So to say, there are no questions so far. So what I will do, I will bring up some of the issues and different comments that have been made throughout the consultation so far, and ask some of the design team to address them. So I guess first question really, and obviously it's been a significant interest throughout the consultation, is on the listed building. So first question is for you, Graham, and I suppose it would be useful maybe if you could explain a wee bit more of the extent of the repairs and the work that will be done to the listed building, both sort of internally and externally.
Okay. Yes, Matthew. Thank you. Okay. So I suppose the building from a distance, this looks like a very fine building, but even when you're walking past on the street, you can see externally that there are some cracks have appeared. So this is a condition that it's been nicknamed Regent Street disease, from Regent Street in London, where I suppose buildings which look to all intents and purposes as masonry buildings. If Niall wouldn't mind just flicking back to the slide, I think it was slide number 7. It shows the building under construction. So I suppose before this date, Victorian and into 20th century buildings would have been, yes, thank you, Matt, or thank you, Niall. Buildings would have been load bearing, and I suppose this building was from the early days of concrete framing. So just on screen there at the moment, on the photos on the left hand side in the middle, it shows the building under construction. Now, as with all new technologies and building techniques, they didn't necessarily get it right. So when they were building with concrete framing in the 1930s, we're now, I suppose, 90 years on from that. And so the reinforcement steel within the concrete can expand if moisture gets in there. That in turn then presses against the back of the stone facing. So it's not solid stone, that's just a facing. And I suppose that causes displacement of the stone, which it can push out. It can then crack across the face of the stones. So this is work that we're doing quite often, where we are analysing buildings. We're going up there in a cherry picker, which we did last Sunday, and I see some eagle eyes from City Centre photographed that, and I believe there were some images on Twitter. So we look at each stone of the building, we mark those up for repair, we see which stones need replaced, but it's not just a case of fixing cosmetically the building, it's a case then of perhaps removing stones, treating the steel or the concrete behind that. Other elements, I suppose, are the steel windows and the spandrel panels. Our first look at those from high level suggest that the windows are in very good condition. They appear to have been galvanized, so they've lasted very well. There's a few will have to be removed for repair, but 90% of them appear as if they will be okay for reuse. Internally then, I suppose the focus of our work is looking at what is significant about the building. So internally you're looking for features of plasterwork and details. So most of that is focused around the banking hall itself. The upper floors are really very plain. It's just a very plain concrete building internally. But in the banking hall, you have coffered ceilings and plasterwork to the walls and around the sill details, etc. And some details around the doors, very fine metalwork on the doors, which goes internally to externally. So I hope that's okay, Matthew.
Yes, thank you, Graham. I think that was really useful. Thanks very much. We're also joined on the webinar by Paul Beacom from MRP, who is going to be the applicant on this scheme. And I guess we have a question in there just on timescales, and what sort of timescales there are for the development. And I suppose also, there's several elements to the development, with the office use, the residential use, and the leisure use through the hotel. So, Paul, if you maybe want to talk a little bit about timescales and maybe about what do you think this development will do for this part of the city centre?
Okay. Thanks, Matthew, and thanks everybody for joining this webinar. I must admit, it's the first public consultation that we have done online, and a bit nervous about it at the start, thinking how might it go. But ironically, I think it can work very well, because you get an opportunity, albeit at a fixed time, but an opportunity to hear from our design team to talk you right through the scheme and the concept, and sometimes even where we have public consultation as a live event, you don't always get that chance because people are popping in and out periodically. So hopefully you've all enjoyed that. Going right through from conceptual stage and how we've come up with the design, and you will probably also have recognised that we have a lot more detail on this scheme than you might typically have at this stage of a planning application. We work very hard to do that and to make sure that when it, I suppose, got its first public airing, that we've done a lot of work back and forth with ATD, the Heritage people, and Belfast City Council planners to make sure that the concept and the design was well thought through. So hopefully you acknowledge that as well. To deal with the question then on timescales, clearly a very difficult and unusual time for all of us, COVID. And that might dictate timeline to a large degree, particularly the uses. I think that's an advantage of the mixed use. It's quite a large site. It's 1 acre in total, and we've got 3 different uses: hotel, office, and residential. And those sectors are all impacted by the current pandemic. Some much more than others. Hotels particularly, residential not so much. But with a lot of these schemes of this scale, it's a longer term process anyway. In fact, we've started to invest, and we've invested heavily in the site going back quite a number of years. But we're confident that this, particularly this area of the city centre, it is fast evolving, it is changing rapidly, and I suppose it's a sign of our confidence in the city centre, particularly this area of the city centre, that we will be able to bring forward the scheme. We can't comment on exactly when we may start it, because that's going to again be dictated by end users and investor appetite. But I think the Ulster University will further change the landscape when it completes towards the end of next year. So we're quite excited about the prospects for the city, and particularly for this site.
Great, thanks, Paul. Useful. So I suppose that there was a final question just on public space, and the public space is proposed as part of the plan. So I suppose, Niall, it'd be maybe useful, I know you did discuss it slightly about the square behind the hotel and stuff, but perhaps you could talk through a bit about sort of the proposed new entry that are part of the plans and the public space that's within that.
Yeah, that's no problem. So really what we're trying to do is, this was something that came about quite early in the design, and we see there's a real opportunity here within this area of the city centre too. There's a lot of new developments coming up. You've got the one across the road at Gresham Street. You've also got the 6th, and then you've got the University of Ulster campus. So one thing, I suppose, from a master planning aspect early in the design, we thought of was, you could start to try and link these sites, and if the central library too ever in the future was extended out the back, that could also form part of this. So this was something that we've discussed too with the planners from a very early stage, but we feel that this could be a real successful space, and that's why we've drawn the entrance from the office space out from the outer perimeter of the building into the heart of the square to try and really activate it during the day. And then in the evening too, you'll then have the hotel opening onto this. So we see it, it could almost be like quite like the Bullet Square, I suppose. And we feel that there's a real opportunity here. These little pocket spaces, I suppose you see them a lot. If you're wandering through London, you kind of, it's that idea of exploring, what's around this corner, and then all of a sudden it opens up into this this kind of wee undiscovered space, and that's what we're kind of trying to recreate. So with the entries, we're looking at other entries within the city centre, what makes them successful, and we're trying to implement that into this design here. So this idea that you've maybe come in under the building at a one-story height, and then all of a sudden it opens up, and that sense of reveal that you get from the space. And so I think it's a really exciting prospect, and I think it could be a real good addition to the city centre. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Niall. I think that was helpful. We've no further questions at the minute, so I guess what I can say is if anyone does have any other issues that they want to discuss, or any feedback or comments or questions, they can get in touch via email or via the website, and we can get those questions addressed and get answers for you. I think with that, if there's nothing else coming in, we can end and say thanks very much to everyone for coming along and taking the time out of your day to do this. We will keep you up to date with the future of this planning application, and thanks very much. Thank you.